So you start at a tavern. What do you do? I'm gonna go like get a drink. All right then. You walk up to the bartender. What do you do? Well, I'm gonna get a drink. Right then. How much do you pay? I pay however much the drink costs. Okay. Fair enough. You get the drink, and what do you do now? I mean, what do you think I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna go sit at the table or something. Okay. You get to the table. What do you do? I sit next to the table on the chair. I get the chair, I pull it back, and I get my bottom and I put it on the chair such that I am sitting. Okay, good. Alright. A monster breaks through the fucking wall and it has like huge mandibles and plus it has 8 intelligence, 2 charisma, 12 strength, and 18 constitution. Oh, and dexterity. It has some. Fuck. Oh wow, it's a cool monster with like numbers you have. So awesome. I'm gonna like attack it. Okay. It takes 5 damage. It's gonna attack you as well. It deals 8. What do you do? What do you think I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna attack. I'm literally just gonna attack. Your monster just attacks, and I just attack. So we're just going to attack. Okay. Problem player keeps interrupting combat. Dear Reddit, what am do? Oh, alrighty. Huge red flag. Agreed. There's the French way and the English way. What is the French way? Oh, I don't have a guillotine. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is GDS, and today I've upgraded to a room, which means there's going to be some reverb, so I'm going to try to keep my voice down a little bit. I hope you don't mind it too much. I have moved. Most of the videos that you've seen in the last 4 weeks were recorded pretty much in the span of a few days. Anyways, I do welcome you back, and I hope the audio is not too bad. And this video is going to be about how to make interesting monsters. If you hoped for a tutorial on how to use legendary actions and bonus actions and all that nonsense, you've come to the wrong place. Personally, I don't care too much for how D&D 5th edition does monster design, because I think in many cases D&D monsters are kind of boring. A lot of them are just kind of meat bags with some damage. But with that said, I'm not here to rant about D&D 5th edition monster design. I'm here to show you how I actually do monster design for my game. And I think this works regardless of what system you're using. Maybe it wouldn't work in a very narrative system, but as long as you're using some kind of mechanics and have some kind of monster fighting, I think this will work for you. So in that vein, the first thing I'll tell you is forget everything you thought you knew about monster making, at least the stuff from the official material. I think the DMG's guide for making monsters has more steps than that really tall mountain in Skyrim. It's not good. And not only is it not good, it also might make you feel like making monsters is really difficult and complicated, which is a shame because it's really not. It's fun and it's pretty easy to do. I do it for pretty much every session I run. Okay, maybe not every session, but it's, every other session. So let's just get going. The first thing we're going to figure out is what kind of monster are you trying to make? What kind of niche or what kind of area does it fulfill in your campaign? What's the purpose of this monster? I think I've identified 3 primary types of monsters. There may be more, but I think these work pretty well for design. And these are minions, elites, and bosses. Minions are very squishy. They die in 1 or 2 regular hits. They come in large numbers though, so they can be dangerous, and many times they are commanded by bosses or elites. So by themselves they don't have any crazy abilities, but when they work in numbers and work coordinated, they can be pretty dangerous. And the next up are elites. They deal more damage, they're a little bit more tanky, and they tend to have some special abilities which make them dangerous. And then usually these fall into two types. Some of them are really strong combatants and they don't need to command any minions. The other ones are really good at commanding minions, so that's really where their power comes from. And of course you can have stuff in between and some really powerful elites which do both. So it makes sense, elites usually come in small groups or with a bunch of minions. But if you make an elite too strong, you might run the risk of making it into a boss. A boss is even more tanky, it does even more damage, usually. Sometimes it doesn't need to, because bosses have a lot of flavorful and cool abilities and really strong ones. Bosses usually, pretty much always, come in one. They are good at taking on an entire party on their own. So that's a very quick rundown of the three types of enemies, the minion, the elite, and the boss. Let's figure out what we actually need to design for all of these, because clearly what the DMG says you need to design is not what you need to design. Keep in mind that you can come up with a lot of this nonsense on the spot by just making up numbers that sound correct with no real detriment to your game. So let's see what you do need to come up with. There are 4 parts, yes, only 4 parts, and they are HP, AC, attacks, and abilities. Where's the spellcasting? Spellcasting is in abilities. I really don't care what spell slots my monster needs to use its spells. Whatever number of spell slots and whatever level of spell slots it needs to use, it has that. Okay, we assume it has that. If you can't tell, I'm a little bit triggered by the way monsters are usually done. So, hit points. How many hits does the monster need to take before it's dead? I know that's not usually what hit points mean in D&D. Usually it's just some number and you subtract the smaller number from the bigger number until the bigger number is 0. But I find that for running monsters, especially if you're running a lot of monsters, it's better to just use hit points. That is, if the monster takes regular damage, you take off 2 hit points. And if the monster takes a little damage, you take off 1 hit point. When it gets to 0 hit points, it dies. That's it. Regular damage, 2 hit points, small damage, 1 hit point. So you might end up with a monster having 10 HP. That doesn't mean that if it takes 10 damage, it dies. We don't really care exactly how much damage the characters do. We care if it seems like a normal amount of damage or a little bit of damage. So you might end up with a monster that has, for example, 10 HP. That doesn't mean that if it takes 10 damage, it dies. It means that it takes like 5 good hits to kill it, and maybe 10 really weak hits to kill it. Usually it's going to end up being a mix. So for coming up with hit points, my best advice to you is think about how many regular hits you think the monster would be able to take. And also keep in mind that usually a party is composed of 4 to 5 players, so it's gonna take some hits. The next part is AC. I don't care what armor it uses. It's gonna use whatever armor and whatever feats and whatever nonsense it needs to get to the AC that I want it to be. So just come up with an AC number. A good way to come up with an AC number is to look at similar monsters, at similar CRs to what you're trying to make, and just steal those ACs. Or that works for HP as well, just steal the HP. But of course, when you do that, convert it to our HP system instead of just a blanket number. So far we have what keeps the monster alive, HP and AC. You can find references for both of these in the monster manual, or just looking at other monsters and picking numbers that you think seem correct. Next up is attacks. You have a plus to your attack, and you have some dice that you roll for your attack. That's it. That's all attacks are. I don't care what type of damage they deal, you could come up with that extremely easily, and you shouldn't bother to write it down. Don't waste your bandwidth, you're a GM, you have a lot to keep track of. So for the attacks, you really need 3 things. How many attacks you have, the bonus to hit, and then the damage. That's really all you need. And again, if you want to find references for that and kind of figure out what number is correct, just go to the monster manual or look up monsters online that are similar and just steal the numbers from there. You can tweak it a little bit. It's not a big deal. Next up, abilities. I think this part is the most important part for making monsters, which is why it's so unfortunate it's often overlooked, especially if you look at official material and official monsters. It's pretty unimpressive in that department. If I had to sum up abilities with one sentence, it's this. Stuff that the monster does that's not attacks. That's about it. It could be spells or it could be unique stuff that you come up with. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that it supports the narrative and it hits cool beats that you think should be hit in the combat in order to make the monster feel cool. So there are 3 steps for coming up with abilities. The first one is narratively, what do you want to happen during this fight? So if the players are fighting a Medusa, we might want them to try to avert their gaze in order to not be turned into stone. And then the second thing is what mechanic would make that narrative beat happen? So now we're taking the idea of something we want to happen and we're asking, okay, what kind of mechanic, what kind of real thing in the game is going to make the players act in the way I want them to act? And this is not in a railroading sense, it's in a narrative sense. One important thing to remember is that you are not a video game designer. You don't have the luxury of playtesting your material and then using it. No, when you make your material and then you bring it to the table, that's the first time you try to play with it. So it's bound to happen that sometimes you pick HP values or AC values or attacks that are just too low or too high. In these instances, I give you a permission to monkey with these values. It's really difficult being a DM as is, and there is really no shame in saying, well, I got that part wrong when designing it, maybe I should fix it now to make sure the table is not having a bad experience. Keep in mind, I'm not saying you should tweak the monster to kill your players or tweak the monster to not kill your players. That totally depends on why the monster is there. You should tweak the numbers when your design is not doing what you expect it to do in a bad way, in a way that badly influences the game. And don't worry, because we're going to do examples just after this, but before we do, I just want to say, don't worry about all the other nonsense. You really don't need it. You really don't. I know you think you do, but you don't. Just try out this method and you'll see it's much better for you as a GM, and there is much less to keep track of. So I think it's best to run through a few examples just to see what I'm talking about. The first one is going to be an ogre. Let's try to make an ogre. Now, I don't think an ogre is weak. It seems more of an elite enemy. It's probably going to be one, but it might be in a group of enemies. I don't think it can take the entire party on at once. For HP, I'm just going to give it 10. I could give it more. I could give it 20 maybe, if I think that's too low. Remember that regular hits do 2 damage. And then for the AC, I'm just going to steal the one that ogres already have, and I'm going to choose 11, because that seems like a correct number. For how much damage it does and to hit, I'm going to have just +6 and then 1d8 +4, because I think I stole that also. I have it in my notes. I think I stole it. If I didn't, I think it's fine. So we have the 3 basic numerical values for our monsters, which is the HP, the AC, and the attack. Now it's up to us to make the abilities. So I'm thinking it would be cool if somebody tries to attack the ogre and he just grabs the blade and like, nope, throws it away. Or throws you away. Either one. So I'm going to make this ability and I'm going to call it Nope. When the ogre is hit by an attack, it instead takes no damage. It grabs the blade, it grabs the user, and it just throws them away at a wall. And if there is no wall, we can say maybe at the ground 30 feet away. We could say they take 2d8 +4 damage, and they are stunned until their next round. I think this ability does well to make the ogre a real beast. But if we want to do so, I also like the idea of it really being enraged and angry. I don't know why ogres are always angry, but this one is very angry. It's very angry. And I think when we think about angry beasts, at least in the pulp fantasy, usually they don't just start off angry. Well, maybe they start off moderately angry, but it's usually when they get hit enough, they're like, "Rah, now I'm really angry." So we can say once the ogre reaches half HP, it gets a free attack as a reaction on all adjacent creatures. We can also say that it doesn't matter if the creature is a friend or a foe of the ogre. It doesn't care. It's raging, just like your League of Legends teammates. But unlike them, we will also give the ogre an advantage in all saving throws on all subsequent rounds. I don't really care if people think this is OP and unbalanced. I don't care for the way D&D 5th edition categorizes OP or balance. If it's cool, if it's fun, that's all I care about. And I don't know what CR this monster is either. I don't care about that magical value. I don't think you should either. There's far too much obsession with these meaningless values like ability scores and stuff like that. When it comes to monsters, it doesn't matter. Anyways, enough ranting for now. Let's make a minion, like a zombie. So for HP, I want the zombies to be very weak, but I want there to be a lot of them. So I'm going to give them just 2 HP. For AC, I'm going to give them 10 because that seems like a correct number. And then for attack, I think I stole it from some manual somewhere. +4 to attack, and then 1d6 +1 damage. Now on to abilities. As you can tell, this is the best part. I like the idea of reassembling skeletons and undead, so I'm gonna do it. I want my players to kill a horde of zombies, think they're all dead, and then watch the zombies reassemble and get back up. So, I'm gonna say that when the zombies are killed, you roll a 1d6 for every zombie at the end of the round, And if you get 4, 5, or 6, the zombie is reassembled with 1 HP. I think this is pretty similar to the already existing reassembling mechanic. I don't see any reason to change it, it's cool. Another thing I like is when the zombies surround the party and kind of slow them and take them down with their zombie undeady corruption. So I'm gonna give the zombies Corrupting Touch. When they hit a player, that player has -1 AC for the rest of the round, and this effect stacks. So you really don't want to be surrounded by a bunch of zombies. I think that's enough for the zombie. Remember, we're not trying to make it too powerful. This is a minion and there's going to be a bunch of them. So we don't want to get stuff that's too hard to keep track of or that's too strong. So speaking of being commanded, let's make some kind of Necromancer who is going to command the zombies. For HP, I'm going to give him 10 because that seems like a cool number. And for AC, I'm going to give him 15 because I think 15 is also a cool number. 15 is a very special number. It's the number of legs 2 spiders have if one of them is missing 1 leg. So for attacks, I'm going to say he has +5, and then for damage, he has 2d6 +3. That doesn't mean he's using a longsword. He's using whatever weapon he needs to get 2d6 +3. I don't really care which one he needs to. Actually, I can say he's just using some kind of sickle because I don't know, that seems evil. So the first thing I'm going to give him is the ability to actually raise zombies, because, you know, that's the whole idea. And I'm going to call this one Rise. Once per combat, he can create 1d4 +3 zombies. Why 1d4 +3? I don't know, it just seems like a correct number. You can feel free to change it if you want to. Now, I like the idea of the Necromancer summoning hands out of the ground and walls to grab players and hold them down. So I'm going to give him the ability Zombie Hands. Once per combat, as a bonus action, he can choose a circle that's 30 feet in diameter, and hands start to come out of the ground in that area. Anyone in this area must make a strength saving throw of 20 or be restrained until the beginning of their next turn. You might say that a DC of 20 is really high. I know it's really high, that's part of the point. If the bad guy just misses his cool attack, the players might feel relieved, but later they're like, that wasn't really that cool. Make sure your bad guys are able to actually pull off their cool abilities. Because an iconic enemy who doesn't use their iconic move, or who uses their iconic move and have it totally miss, is kinda lame. It's not fun and it's not cool. So that's a little bit of knowledge. This guy probably needs a way to deal with ranged combatants, or maybe deal with combatants who are trying to run away. So I'm gonna give him the ability, You. As a bonus action, or as a reaction to someone moving out of their attack range, they send out a spectral hand. This decomposing thing must be avoided with a dexterity saving throw of 17, and if it's not, it grabs them and pulls them towards the Necromancer 30 feet. I guess you can also make it deal 2d6 damage if you want to. Again, the DC is high because I want this ability to work. I'm not trying to kill my players, I'm trying to make this encounter cool, and if the bad guys just miss all their abilities, it's not cool. They might as well not have them. I also like the idea of the Necromancer kind of rallying the existing zombie he has in this frenzy where they are pretty much like unstoppable and climb over walls and all that. So we can say once per combat, as a bonus action, he can rally the zombies, and then they gain plus 30 movement speed, regardless if they already moved this round. They are immune to any debilitating effects that would restrict their movements, and they can move over walls or ceilings or stuff like that with their normal movement speed. You might say this is OP, but again, I don't really care as long as it's fun and it's cool. My goal is not to kill the players, my goal is to create epic narrative moments, and I think this is one of them. Just imagine seeing a horde of zombies and then suddenly they go crazy and start climbing the walls towards you. Finally, I want this Necromancer to use his powers as a last-ditch effort to cling on to life and kill the party. And I'm going to call this one Not Yet. When killed, the Necromancer is going to draw all the bones and the flesh of the zombies towards him, and it's going to spin around in this whirlwind, and then out of it going to emerge a big flesh zombie monster thing. So he's going to transform himself into a big zombie boy. I want this form to be dangerous, but also easier to kill, so I'm going to give it like an HP of 5 and AC of 10, and then 2 attacks which I can give plus 7, and they can deal something like 2d8 plus 3. So I think that's a cool encounter for the Necromancer and the zombies. I'm going to do one more, which is going to be a boss. This one is going to be the Medusa. I love using the Medusa because it's so iconic and it's very cool. And you should use the Medusa too. Please. So for HP, I'm going to give it 20. For AC, I'm going to give it 15. So for attacks, I'm going to give her 2 options. The first one is going to be a spear, which gets plus 5 to attack. And then it deals 1d6 plus 2 damage and an extra 1d6 of poison damage. I know usually I said don't bother about the type of damage, but here it reinforces the theme that this is dealing poison damage. And also later, the players might be able to retrieve her spear or her arrows, which we'll talk about in just a second, and actually get that effect, which is pretty cool. The second attack she can use is the longbow, which also gets +5 to attack. This one deals 1d8 damage, +2, and it gets the extra 1d6 poison damage that the spear got. So these are her attacks, and she could use 2 attacks per turn. Obviously, I don't think we should let her just switch between them, so she would have to choose one and then attack with it twice. The first one, an iconic ability, Petrifying Gaze. When you look directly at the Medusa, you have to make a DC 14 Constitution saving throw. If you fail, you don't just turn into a stone thing yet, because that's not interesting if you just fail and die. Let's say you're beginning to turn into stone. I think this is also more dramatic because you see your party members. So their next turn, they make another DC 14 Constitution saving throw, and if they fail that, they turn into stone. There is no saving throws, there is nothing like that. They just epically and dramatically freeze as they turn into stone. And I think that's pretty cool. When you have an iconic monster like the Medusa and you treat her with respect in the design phase, the players are going to treat her with respect in the game. We can tell the players that if they attack the Medusa normally, they have to look at it, and so they have to roll the Constitution saving throw. But if they don't, they can choose to avert their gaze, and they get a disadvantage on their attack as if they're attacking blinded, but they don't need to roll the Constitution saving throw. I think this will make the Medusa far more tankier than it seems, because everyone is going to get disadvantaged against her, if they don't want to be turned into stone, or if they don't feel lucky. So just keep that in mind as you're designing or deploying the Medusa. You might have to tweak some of the numbers, and that's totally fine. So the Medusa has a snake body, as everybody knows, so I'm going to give her an ability to use it, and I'm going to call it Lunge. And basically, she can increase her attack range by 5 feet for any attack. Before you say it's OP, again, I don't care. I think it's cool for the Medusa to basically coil up and strike forward like a snake, because, you know, she's a half snake. That's part of the deal. And speaking of snakes, everybody knows she has snake hair. So we can say if you end your turn adjacent to her, you take 1d6 damage from the snakes. Another ability I'm going to give her to reinforce the fact that she's half snake is Constrict. We can say she can do this instead of attacking or as an action. So you roll a strength saving throw against a DC of 16, and if you fail, you are constricted, which means you are restrained. On her turn, she can choose to constrict you and deal 1d6 plus 3 damage, and on your turn, you could re-roll the saving throw and see if you can get out. Now, keep in mind, there is no reason the Medusa can't attack you while you're constricted. I mean, she can just kind of point her spear down and stab you. The final ability I'm going to give the Medusa is Snake Body, which is going to let her move through shallow water at normal speed, unimpeded. Usually, shallow water would be rough terrain, so players would need to spend twice the move speed to get through it. Now, this might seem kind of nonsensical and like, who cares about that fact? But actually, if you put some water or rivers in the area where the players fight the Medusa, it's going to make a big difference as the Medusa tries to kite them around. I can actually certify this because I've run a one-shot with this Medusa multiple times, and it was really cool. This ability lets the Medusa kite the players around and outmaneuver them. Which kind of makes sense, because if you're a Medusa, you're probably going to set up in a place where is to your natural advantage, so if the party walks into it, they better know what they're doing. So to summarize, we have 3 types of monsters: the minion, the elite, and the boss. The minions are weaker, they come in big numbers, they usually don't have any huge abilities, but sometimes they are commanded by elites. Elites can command minions, or they can be tough opponents in their own small groups. They usually have higher damage, higher HP, higher AC, stuff like that. And then we have the bosses, who can take on an entire party pretty much on their own. They usually have big abilities, a lot of them, special abilities, usually more tanky, do more damage, that kind of stuff. And remember, you really don't need all the other nonsense that you think you need. It's actually very easy and very fun to make monsters. I hope you found this video useful, or at least interesting. If you disagree with anything I've said, please comment. I'll probably look at it because you're the only person commenting. And if you like the video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. I've been told there's a bell you can hit and then you get a notification or something. I'm going to be uploading every Thursday. That's the schedule now if you haven't caught up. And that's how you make interesting monsters. At least that's how I do it. That's about it. I'll see you later.